Welcome back, troops, to Let's Tab 59. What am I up to today? It's Sunday. Trace around had me doing a few chores this morning, and rightly so. And it's such a lovely day this afternoon, I thought, right, let's get out and do a tab. So I'm out on a 6-miler, got about a mile and a half to do. Hope everyone's fitting well. Let's pull over here. Let's pull over here for a minute. Try and keep the camera a bit more steady. Okay, so about a mile and a half to do, as I say, and that's me done. So as the title of this video suggests, I'm talking today about stagging on, guard duties and other duties that we used to do in the army. So first of all then, let's clear up one thing, stagging on and stagging. If you're outside the UK, you might not have heard that terminology before, and even if you're in the UK, you might not be familiar with the word stag or stagging on. Basically, it's army slang for a shift. So for instance, if you were on guard duty, you normally done 2 hours on guard and 4 hours resting in the guard room, and then back on for 2 hours. 2 on, 4 off. That 2 hours that you were on stag. You were stagging on. That's what we called it. Now, the other thing I want to clear up is, obviously, I can only talk about the guard duties and other duties that I did in my time and the units that I served in, and the era that I served in. Everyone's going to be slightly different, so mine's just what I experienced. So let's talk about other duties then before we go on to guard duty. We had different duties, as I say. You normally got 1 or 2 a month on top of your guard, maybe. So the first one I'll talk about is cookhouse duties. That was a bit of a nightmare. So how did that work? Well, after breakfast, there's only single guys that done it. If you was a married soldier, you didn't do cookhouse duties. So if single soldier, you were private soldiers only. You'd report after breakfast to the head chef, normally a sergeant or whatever, senior rank in the cookhouse, and he would detail you off. There's normally 2 of you, and you'd be working in the cookhouse, cleaning and washing up all the greasy pots and pans at chef. You might do a bit of veg prep as well, a bit of spud barbering, peeling potatoes, peeling veg, but mainly it was washing up dirty, greasy pots and pans. Not very nice. And you'd do that until he'd finished with you. The chef had finished with you. It was normally after evening meal. He would release you, so it could be gone 6 o'clock by the time you finish. You come back to the block stinking. He was in coveralls, his green overalls, stinking of grease and fat. It was horrible, thankless job. The only good thing about it, I suppose, was during the winter, when it was really cold out in Germany, you were in the warm. You were in the cookhouse, it was always nice and warm. There was always a cup of tea on the go and a bit of food going. And at least you weren't out on the vehicle park, track bashing or laying under a wagon with a wire brush gunking the leaf springs off. So it's a little bit, that's the only good thing about it, I suppose. Apart from cookhouse, what other duties were there? Well, we had a duty driver, we should call it a duty clutch. That was a 24-hour duty. You'd go down to the guard room, obviously you had to be driver qualified. Again, normally a private rank soldier, wasn't a corporal's job. You go down to the guard room, report there, take over the duty Land Rover, first parade it, check it out. And then you'd be at the beck and call of the provost sergeant, maybe, or the guard commander, or orderly officer, whatever it was. And any little jobs that needed doing, anyone needed running about, ferrying about anywhere, that's what you did. You jump in your Land Rover and off you go and do the detail. And that was you for 24 hours. That wasn't a bad duty because a lot of the time you weren't being used. You could just chill out in the guard room, watch a bit of telly, cup of tea, sleep, whatever you wanted. There was also an MO's driver. We had an MO's driver, a medical officer's driver, because we didn't have a med centre in our camp. So you would have a car for that. I think it was an old Vauxhall Astra or something, a state car, maybe a Ford Escort estate, I can't remember, normally black. And you would drive any details for the medical officer. So if he needed picking up and taking somewhere to visit a patient, because obviously the families out in Germany didn't have normal civilian GPs, they come under the military umbrella. So he would treat them, or you might have to pick them up from the Americourt or take them into the med centre if they didn't have a vehicle or the husband was away or whatever. So MO's driver, that was a nice cushy number 2. We had one other duty I can remember, which is like a battery runner, a company runner. So you'd report normal working hours to the company or battery office, and the sergeant major would use you for stuff, or the OC, the officer commanding, or maybe even the clerks that worked in the company battery office. They'd want things running about, picking up, maybe taking documents. It's all on foot. You walked around the camp delivering a bit of post or whatever. That was a fairly easy number. So that was some of the other duties we had. I might have missed some. You might know some other ones, but that's what we had. Now, guard, going on guard. We had quite a weird system because we had Monday to Friday, the security of the camp in the daytime, working hours, was done by the regimental police. So they were same cap badge, artillery or whatever, and they would run the guard room, operate the barrier, check ID cards, etc., and look after any prisoners that we might have in the guard room. So we used to have prison cells in there with soldiers under sentence, SUS, serving up to 28 days maybe. They had to be taken to meals, escorted back and forwards to meals, etc. And the regimental police would do that. And that was a 3-month stint being on regimental police. You could get pinged for that. You wore a sort of dark blue armband with red lettering, RP, regimental police. And if you was a private soldier and you got pinged for it, you got local rank of Lance Corporal, Lance Bombardier. So the regimental police run the security Monday to Friday, but at night times, after working hours, the guard would mount, and that would be an 8-man guard, I believe. You'd have a corporal or a bombardier, full bombardier, be the guard commander, and he had a marching relief, a second in command, to be a lance corporal, lance bombardier, and you run it then throughout the night. And the corporal, the guard commander, and the lance corporal, the marching relief, the 2IC, they would split the night between them, and then the rest of you would do 2 on and 4 off, 2 hours on stag, 2 hours, 4 hours off. And you'd have a guy at the front gate, depends on the threat level you're under actually, but normally you have a guy on the front gate that was armed with a rifle and somebody operating the red and white barrier up and down. And then you'd have another guy walking around the inside of the camp doing sort of perimeter checks, checking on buildings. Prowler sentry we called him, and he'd carry a pick elf. I don't know why, but he'd get a pickaxe handle to carry. So that was the makeup of the guard basically. Now, one interesting point on this, our regiment certainly did it, we used to have a stick man, or the real correct name for it was attending man. So when you mounted a guard, there was always one extra soldier on guard, a private soldier. When you mounted, you got inspected by the guard commander, then the orderly sergeant would come out and inspect you, and then ultimately the orderly officer would come down and inspect your turnout and make sure everything was correct. The best turned out man, the best dressed, the sharpest looking, cleanest, best looking uniform on the guy, he would get chosen. The orderly sergeant and the orderly officer would decide amongst themselves which man was the smartest on that guard mount, and they would announce his name, and he then was known as a stick man or attending man. He was like a reserve, so he got knocked off. He could go back up the block and stay up there. He could get out of his uniform and just chill out. But if one of the guard went down for whatever reason, he was like a substitute, a reserve. They'd go and wake him up and bring him down, and he'd take over that position. So if you turned out nice and smart, you could get off a guard. And I remember we had a guy in our unit, I won't give his name out, Gary, we call him Gary, but he was just immaculate. He had one of these uniforms, it was perfect fit, the colours matched, the camouflage pattern, the trousers, the same level of fading in it, and it was just starched to death. It was an awesome bit of kit. And he used to rent it out. He always got stickman, so if you got to him before he was on guard, if he was the right size, that is, it fitted you, and you could borrow it, he'd lend it to you for 10 marks or whatever, and you'd put his kit on and go down. 9 times out of 10, his kit would get you into stickman, and you'd be knocked off for the night. So that's just a few memories of duties and guards and stagging on that I can remember. I'm sure you guys out there can think of a lot more. Please let me know. Thank you all for your support so far. Keep the comments coming. I really do enjoy them. I try and answer every comment I can, as best I can anyway. So I'm going to stag on now on the tab. Mile and a half to go up the road here, and then that's me done. So till the next time, troops, thank you very much. And remember, let's tab.